Hello and welcome to the latest Arabian Business Podcast. My name is Eddie Taylor and today we're talking about food and drink and entertainment and all of the many different elements that go into creating and maintaining a successful restaurant brand in the UAE. Obviously, it's been a catastrophic year for the sector, probably only rivaled by aviation and events in terms of the size of the damage wreaked by COVID. It does, though, look as though there are better times around the corner, with restrictions being lifted, brunches back on the menu, and a whole year of pent-up demand to service. But for restaurateurs and for would-be restaurateurs, do the numbers still make sense? Can you still put food on the table by, well, putting food on the table? Discussing this and more, I'm delighted to be joined by Gabrielle Mather, founder and CEO of Restaurant Secrets, Inc., who've launched more than 300 restaurant concepts in Dubai. And also Ramzy Abdul-Majeed, co-founder and chairman of boutique hospitality company Whissle Group, which has been behind a host of beloved homegrown concepts here, including Claw and Okku. Welcome both. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Gabrielle, can I start with you? Just give me an overview. How bad has it been for the restaurant industry in the last 12 months? You know, what are your peers, what are your clients telling you about just how challenging an environment it has been?
Yeah, it has been difficult, as we all know. I think the lockdown we had was in March of 2020. And I'd like to see that, and I do see that as phases. The first phase was where we all sort of were the first few months wondering what's happening, and we were operating our own restaurants. So we had to really evolve and see where the market is going. With deliveries going out, we shifted most of our dine-in concepts to delivery. That was the first thing we did. And the market was very receptive. People still want to eat. We live in a country where delivery has always been a big thing. So in a way, the operators that saw that opportunity to just evolve the business of food into we'll reach you instead of you coming to us because of the lockdown, they sort of survived the initial months. What I saw as a consultant for Restaurant Secrets was the call out. We were called out by so many people looking for help in what is wrong with our product, what is wrong with our operations, why aren't we making money? Because pandemic was just one of the last things that happened. We've already been having a lot of problems in the industry. We've got too many restaurants. We don't have a great product always. Sometimes people don't know how to operate and they don't have the funds to continue with the marketing of their restaurants. So interestingly, the first batch of people that came in were the ones that had opened just a few months before the lockdown. And here they were, they hadn't even had a chance to try out their products and already they had to let go of staff and let go of rent, pay rents and didn't know what to do. So the initial months, I would say right from July until October, we did a lot of audits for people. We came up with solutions. We redid their feasibilities. We did a lot of product development and we saw them slowly pick up. I'm talking about people with resilience. Not everybody reaches out. Some people just look at that as as this, I can't get over it, and they just shut down. But I'm talking about the ones with grit, the ones that, wanted to know, what am I doing wrong? And let's call in someone who's done it before and help us. So we did that for until October. But after that, we saw a great turn. With all the initiatives by the government, with landlords turning to TOR on rents, with more investor people saying that there is no money in the market, but investors feeling that Dubai was a place with the initiatives that were taken. We started again looking at projects picking up. So we had, first of all, revival of our old projects where people came back in and said, let's continue the projects. And then we also had the new investors coming in, and we've signed on Saudi Arabia. We've signed on new developers. We've signed up large-scale brand operators that have been doing franchises, 45 franchises of their own, and now they're going into homegrown brands, and we're building them for the people. So we've had operators that have been running franchises are now considering homegrown brands. So we're working with certain operators who want to do that, and with the borders opening up, we've got the Saudis coming back in, ready to finish their menu developments, ready to take their brands to the next level. I believe this. I don't believe this just because I'm being hopeful, but from what we've seen, we grew as a company, as a consultancy in the last recession. And we're growing again in the pandemic. F&B is here to stay. It's here to stay, and it's a great business to be in. But again, you need to have the resilience, the right business model to be able to make it.
Ramzy, listening to that, does that kind of timetable match your experience of the restaurants that you run, where it was kind of an initial pause operations, kind of let's assess what's actually gone on, but then there was a period of slow and steady growth when things began to improve towards the end of the year?
I think for us, I'd been involved with a group of other people in the industry for some time previously, working on creating a body to represent the industry. And so actually when the pandemic hit, we decided to accelerate that and launch the Middle East Restaurant Association right at the beginning of the pandemic, and went live with a webinar, on Zoom, and had a lot of people come, and just to raise the profile of the industry in terms of getting people together, listening to many of the issues that people were facing. And that group of individuals there, are industry experts. Some of them are operators, some aren't, some are consultants, some work in hotels. So it was a good group together. And from that, we heard a lot of the things that probably Gabrielle heard that people came to her privately. But we heard them on Zoom calls and then messages and subsequent calls with people. So there was a lot of that. There was a lot of concern. People didn't know what was going to happen. The lockdown here, interestingly, when it happened, it didn't last that long, relatively compared to everywhere else in the world. I mean, it was 3 weeks of total lockdown, and then people started to look to come back. There were obviously restrictions prior to that in March in terms of reduction of capacity, and then reduction subsequently. We did see a lot of people turn to delivery. Not everyone did. With our group, as an example, we chose to turn delivery off. So
why was that? Why did you decide?
It's very simple economics.
Right.
So depending on your locations that you have, if you decide to run delivery and it wasn't, let's say, a staple diet of your business in the first place as a significant size, some turned it on with some of their locations, but many struggled to turn it on properly for the simple reason that they are having to pay rent for significant venues that doesn't justify doing that with the delivery. So the ones that were in delivery before excelled. Others joined the sector and were able to do relatively well. For us, we just took the decision that it was better not to, and just basically had the people relax and rest. Now, having said that, we didn't fire anybody.
Right.
So we made sure, we're very proud of the fact that during the entire period of that pandemic, and we didn't open, restaurants, whether it's here or regionally in Qatar or Saudi or elsewhere where we have exposure and units, we didn't reopen most of them until late June or July. So we stayed closed longer. We put in stringent, facilities in place to sanitize to make sure we could open properly. But as a sector, the sector suffered significantly.
Do we have any numbers or any stats or even anecdotal evidence about sort of the restaurants that didn't make it? Is it kind of 20%, 30%? Do we have any numbers?
There was a significant number that didn't. I think better not to discuss an actual number. There are numbers being floated around.
Well, I can know anecdotally. Some of my favourites didn't make it. Ramusaki didn't make it.
Yeah.
Ruya in the marina didn't make it.
Right. There are. If you look at Dubai alone with the DED, there are some 12,000 odd licenses at DED. That are in place. That doesn't include all of the free zone licenses. Obviously, there are quite a few of those. During last year, yes, you saw quite a few shut down, but at the same time, there were others that took the opportunity to open. So, yes, I agree with Gabrielle. There were, some landlords did go down the TOR route for a few months in the summer, but by the time September came around, many of the landlords were back to, we're not obliged to help. We've helped you for a few months. We need to go back to paying full rent. And so, the sector was recovering. People were starting to reopen. The government obviously has been handling the pandemic very well in terms of how they've closed things. And then the vaccine rollout has been spectacular here. So it makes no sense what we're seeing today with the red list from the UK. Frankly, we're probably one of the safest countries in the world in terms of vaccine rollout and percentage. But with that, obviously one of the concerns that happened, but because we were open as a society and the government did such a good job, everybody and their mother and their father and their sister and brother came to Dubai. And so end of the year, we saw a huge influx of people, which increased the cases. So that then created the knock-on effect in February of the subsequent reduction of capacity to 50%. Hotels were lower capacity. Distance between tables was then increased from 2 to 3 meters. That created a significant challenge to many people, especially in the licensed sector, because generally the non-licensed, I think where Gabrielle, and her team have more experience, it tends to be easier to do delivery there.
Yeah.
It's harder with the licensed.
Gabrielle, sorry, if I can just come in there, Gabrielle, because that was very interesting what Ramzy was saying when talking about relationships with landlords. What about the relationship with landlords and suppliers? I mean, how fractious did they become? Obviously, maybe bills couldn't be paid, or maybe terms couldn't be changed in the way that many restaurateurs would actually have liked. How do we go about rebuilding those relationships in the sector now that things are on the up? Is there a turn that we can't go back to the way things were? Is there a slightly more open and honest dialogue between both sides of the equation?
I think it all, again, depends on the personal relationships that the landlords have with tenants. And every landlord here has their own way of, and their own lease, their own contracts. Same with suppliers. I think if those tenants that have done a good job already and have a track record with landlords of paying on time and, of being the kind of brand that they want to hold on to, most landlords have been very, very open. At least that's what we see in our sector. Whenever I've consulted someone and said, let's, get these kind of numbers through, let's talk to the landlord about what we're doing and we want to stay on and we're worth holding on to, there has been an interest from the landlord, because who wants another turnover? When you've got a great brand operating already, they want to hold on to it. So we've had those. And then we've also had those that don't care, that have just said, go on and we'll get the next one in. So it's a mix. I can't say that it's worked 100% with landlords, but I'm really hoping that with the situation that we're in right now and what we've all learned, that this sector of how leases are done, how rent is calculated, will be a sector that eventually we will have a little bit more work on done. As Ramzy was saying, his group has come up with these solutions, or with, even the fact that we have a committee that can talk about these things. I think that's something that would be one of the agenda to talk about as we go on. It's not resolved, but it's something that, as an evolving market, it needs to consider. Most of the closures are because of rent. That's one of the highest operating costs for any operator right now. About suppliers, everybody works on credit. So these suppliers are also people who have to pay bills, and they've taken on things. So I think it needs to be a win-win situation. And that's where supplier and the consumer need to find negotiation, get on the table. And the ones who've done that have reached good agreements.
How much of your consultancy is about preparing for the next pandemic or the next catastrophe?
We're still recovering from this one.
I was going to say, but have enough restaurateurs understood that this could happen at any time and they need a plan or a policy, or they need cash reserves, or they need a different set of forecasting numbers?
That's a really good question. For the last 20 years or so that I've been consulting, the last 10 years, I felt that people are now actually open to doing a feasibility study. Or bringing in a consultant to help them with product development, or even considering the human resource aspect of it, how important that is. But post-pandemic, I'm seeing so much more better responses to, I don't want to get in until I know what my capex is. I want to know what the rents are. I want to know if this rent will make sense for me in the long term. So I feel that people have learned. We've all learned as humans. But entrepreneurs, in particular F&B, are asking the right questions. People thought this is a very easy business to get into. You cook some food, you sell it. But they're realizing it's a hardcore business. And my job as a consultant is actually to send people back home and not open a restaurant than to say, put another one on the street when we don't need one. We've got more restaurants than we need. There has to be a why to the what. Why do we need the next restaurant?
Have people been knocking on the door saying, I want to open a restaurant even at this time?
On an average, we from the inquiries that we get, we only actually tell 20% or so to come in because they've got some kind of a budget in mind. They've got some kind of a drive to them or some kind of a vision. Most people just want to open a restaurant in a few 100,000 dirhams because they want to get into owning their own business, not realizing that owning a business is a huge responsibility, not just to your own family, but to the families of others. And you need to be able to understand what it means to get into it. So I think that's something that people have sort of picked up over the last few years, where we're looking at this business as a real business that requires a plan, it requires operations, it requires marketing, and it needs a competitive edge and a lot of resilience to go out there and compete with the amazing stuff that we got around.
Ramzy, what are the things that you think have changed permanently in the sector? What are the practices or the policies or even just the ways of thinking that are now locked into running a restaurant?
Well, I think, just to add to what Gabrielle was saying, one of the things that certainly changed because of the initiative that we took last year with the Restaurant Association, the government under the chamber the Dubai chain, but did actually launch the Dubai Restaurant Group, DRG, which is very positive for the sector, because now the sector has an official government voice, where, comments and views are centralized. And, one of the comments that I know has gone there, in the last few months is, when the occupancy was pushed down to 50%, all the landlords continued to charge 100%. And there have been some quite vocal people in the press that have written articles saying, well, why hasn't that changed? That message was delivered. The government was clearly taking caution with the distancing. As soon as they felt capable, they've just shifted it back up. So, that's a very positive aspect of change to the industry, that there is now a voice that's represented at the government level. And the pandemic has helped to create that. I think on another point there, the aspect of what have people learned, sadly, I'll say we're humans. Humans don't learn. So you tend to see, I'll be contrarian with this, but there's a reason, there are wars every 10 years. There are stock market crashes every 10 years. People go through some pain for a year or two, and then they forget. We like forgetting because we want to go down, on the roller coaster ride again. And frankly, I think I just see it happening all over again. Will people change there may be a few more people looking a bit more proactively, being more secure and keeping reserves, but the sector doesn't really allow you to keep reserves. When you have super high rents, and many have not changed, you still see rents because Dubai is busy. So there are still numerous people that want locations, and locations are hard to come by. You talk to the big developers, and we won't name names, and they struggle to have locations to give you. Most of their stock is actually out. So they can charge premiums, and there are people trying to get in. So, I think the reality is in the sector, whilst people may talk about wanting to put reserves aside, they just won't. And so if another pandemic hits, there will be more problems. What you did see as a result of the pandemic is there were some bad businesses, for the large part, that weren't doing well before. And the pandemic was a good excuse for them to get out. These are the ones, as Gabrielle said, that didn't have the guts or the know-how or the financial capability to continue. And this was just a good reason to say, what, enough is enough. Let's just stop. Others have tried to come into the sector. And so certainly one of the things that we see is people trying to be more careful. But there are opportunities now. So, especially for seasoned operators that are here. So, and I'm not just saying our group, but there are, let's say 10 sizable boutique F&B groups within the country. And we get offered some very interesting deals now from developers that actually don't want to go through this again, where what they want is, a group that comes in, is a good operator, will be able to run properly, and isn't doing this for the sake of ego or, just opening a restaurant, because it has to make sense as a business.
So for your group, when it comes to opening up a new concept, I imagine that you're being presented with opportunities all the time to open up one of your concepts or even think about a new concept. What are the key considerations? What are the evaluation points that perhaps are slightly different now than they were maybe 2 or 3 years ago?
Honestly, none. They're the same points.
Same thing.
They're the same points, and I'll talk you through what they are, except we have a better ability to be heard and be listened to. So before we were heard, but they didn't listen. So in one ear, out the other, sorry, but there's someone else willing to pay. The discussion us and others have had in the sector with developers, with landlords, with owners, with hotel owners is, look, what's the point of having someone lease from you if it's a crazy price and in 6, 12, 24 months, they shut down? You have a choice. Either you chase them you let the money go, or if you want to chase for the money, then you're going to have to go through a long court process, in which case the place is boarded up, the customers that are coming by see nothing open, and then when you get it back out of the court process and find a way to try and get some of your money back as a landlord, then you have to give someone else a rent-free period. So you're closing the place for 12 to 24 months. So these landlords and developers are saying, okay, let me get a proper operator in from the beginning. I may get less rent, but I'll get an interesting revenue share on the upside. And so I take that element of fixed costs, because those are the two biggest problems in running any F&B business. First day of the month, the rent starts again, and the staff count starts again in terms of the salaries. The trick is how quickly can you reach that break-even point during the month? If you reach it, many don't. So if you don't, the month rolls by quickly, salaries are due, rent's due again. And so if the next month starts and you haven't hit that point, you've got a real problem. And a lot of people don't hit that point. And so that's where the sector, I think, has learned a little bit, that I think you'll see some of the larger players do that and be able to have more sustainable businesses. But I also, we've seen some rather crazy deals that have been signed in the last few months. And I think there will be some egg on some people's faces in the next few years when some of these businesses just cannot sustain. Because generally in an F&B business, if it's licensed at least, with all the extra costs that come with that, you need to be looking where your rent is really, it shouldn't really cross 10% of your revenue. So
right, that's the ballpark kind of.
In that range. If obviously you need to have enough revenue. So there's no point in having a low revenue and saying, oh, my rent is 40%. That's not the landlord's fault. So, there's both sides, like Gabrielle said. But fundamentally, I think it's going to bring more sensible operators into the sector moving forward. It's still an interesting sector, very much so. There are more opportunities. But some of these opportunities you're looking at is because there's a ton of development that's still happening. There are many, many developments still to open. And that then comes to the point of, potential oversupply. Do you have enough people to create the demand for those, the new mall opening here and the new mall opening in this area and that area? That will create new problems in the next few years.
Gabrielle, you recently put out a paper in which you outlined the costs of opening up a restaurant in Dubai. Can you run us through some of those numbers? What were your key findings from that piece of research?
Right. So that's the first question, as you can guess, that people ask us when they come in. What is it cost? And there is no straightforward answer to what is it cost, because it really depends on the concept. It depends on the size. It depends on the location. But what we've seen is that when we operate or when we help our clients operate restaurants, we get a lot of inquiries from the standalone, non-licensed sector. And we've sort of divided that recently into the small hole-in-the-wall operation, where someone can open it up within $1 million, 200 dirhams, versus a larger full-service restaurant that could be around 2,000 to 3,000 square feet and would cost you upwards of 3 million to 4 million if you do it right. And then post-pandemic, we've had a lot of the
these are upfront costs. These are startup. This is what you need to have right now.
I'm going to run you through each one.
Right.
The third one is a dark kitchen that came up in a bigger way post-pandemic, and which is the easiest one to come through. And that is the place where you can actually experiment a bit. You can come in and try your, how good you are at this F&B model, because all you need is a great product and a delivery service and a kitchen to operate from. So going back to those numbers, we build these numbers based on size. We build these numbers based on what the average build and design costs. And then you've got a capex that you achieve that allows you to say that this is what I cannot do without. So what numbers we put out there are the numbers that I would tell someone, don't even think about it, because you cannot compromise on developing your product with expertise. So for that expertise, you need to pay out. You need licensing fees. You need visas that need to be done up front. And then you need to have a design that can hold. And you need a contractor that can deliver. Because sometimes you can say, what is she saying? I can do it. I've heard that many times. I can do the same thing in 800,000. I've got contacts. I know a contractor who will do it for less. And they've actually gone and done that and come back losing money on that. So I would say these are numbers that personally I've looked at our feasibility studies, and I've seen we've not gone more than 10% off our feasibility, because anything beyond that would be lack of contingency on your funds. So staying with that, we've seen people actually achieve what they wanted to come up with within those numbers that I just expressed. These are not your OPEX. These are just your CAPEX, to put it on ground, to be able to say, I've got enough for the first month, 2 months of rent. I've got the labor costs down. I've got a pre-opening budget put in, and I've got a decent interior that is Instagrammable, food that people will come in for, and a 3 months marketing plan. So that's what we ourselves as consultants doing turnkey. So our specialty is turnkey projects. So we've put on, from the 300 projects that we've done, I think around 60% of those have been turnkey projects. And we put them in almost every corner of Dubai, right from the MAF to Emaar to Dubai Properties to, Jumeirah, every single place. We've got something on the ground. And these are numbers that can go upwards of 1 million, 1.2 million, can go up to 3, depending, again, who your landlord is and what their expectation is on the build, depending on the size. Size matters a lot because everything is equated to size in terms of build, in terms of equipment, in terms of seating capacity.
Does that tally, Ramzy, with your experience? Do those numbers make sense to you and how you've opened your restaurants in the past?
I think it depends on what size of restaurant you're looking at. Whether it's licensed or non-licensed, the level of charge that you're looking at as an average spend for the customer, obviously. So if it's QSR, or if it's casual, or if it's the super fine, the high end dining, and there's a lot of that in Dubai. The high end stuff, no, the numbers don't come anywhere near. It's possibly those numbers at 3 to 6, 7, 8 million, but in a different currency, not dirham.
Right.
So, you look at some of the big restaurants here that have been opened and you're easily seeing $8, $10, $12 million having been spent on them. Where the average spends that customers are then spending are, 1,000 dirham plus. And, payback is obviously very important from an investment perspective. Generally in a restaurant sector, if a restaurant survives, it's a 5-year payback would be let's say the ballpark estimate. If you look at Europe and the US and elsewhere in the world, those two are sort of two large markets, 99% of restaurants don't survive past a year. Here you tend to see restaurants as a sector that are in a sort of a 3-year window before they close. That's not necessarily a function of the business. That's actually a function of the lease they've signed, because you're in it whether you like it or not. So, generally most people will have given post-dated checks for the 3 years. So even if the business hasn't done well for a year, they can't actually run away. There are checks that you need to pay for 2 years. And there have been some examples in the last few years that we've seen where some operators have said, they were unable to negotiate. The landlord said, look, you signed with me. Fair is fair. You didn't run your business well. This is a business. I got into a business too. I have a budget. I can't do anything. You need to pay me the rent. And some operators have said, okay, we'll do that, but they close the restaurant because they would actually lose more money by operating it and having the staff and everything else. So it was cheaper for them just to close the doors and leave it closed for the last year of the lease, and to pay the rent rather than actually operate it. So I think, that payback is a key issue. Some of the ones that have flown here, and, we've had a couple in our portfolio that have done extremely well early, with Okku and Claw. I mean, paybacks were much quicker. Nightclub sector pays back much quicker if it works. If it doesn't, you never get your money back. So it's a difficult sector.
How do you calculate? How would you calculate? Take on a weekend, on your busy nights, on your Thursday, Friday. How do you forecast what kind of revenues you can generate? Because that's got to be the great unknown. Because Gabrielle talked about a marketing budget. It's all very well having a great concept, but you've got to tell people about it. You've got to get the right people in. They've got to bring their friends. There's got to be a word of mouth element. That's the great uncontrollable factor, isn't it? It's just how much footfall your place is going to generate.
That's the $1 million question, or the danger of the F&B sector and the beauty of the sector at the same time. I think in this market, what's been interesting as a small market globally for F&B, there tends to be a lot of support. So what you see, let's say, you'll see a lot of Emiratis that are very, entrepreneurial, will open up a small place on Beach Road or somewhere else, in some of the malls. And what I love about seeing here is that the Emiratis are fully supportive. You go there and it's just packed full of Emiratis. It doesn't happen like that in every country. That happens here when they open concepts, and many of their relatives and friends and others in the sector will support. Sheikh Mohammed has been seen very much going to specific Emirati venues when they have been opened, to support, whether there's poetry there or whether it's, there's a salt concept on the beach when that opened, with one of the founders being an Emirati lady. It's great when you see that, and you don't tend to see it elsewhere. I think from a perspective that we've seen and we've learned from the last year, none of us could have done this without the customers. There was a pent-up demand of people wanting to get out of the house. And we saw that with the massive rush at the end of the year when customers flew from all over the world. Billionaires and millionaires and bloggers and influencers all moved to Dubai because this was open. People wanted to go out. People want to live. They want to feel free. They want to be out. They want to see their friends. They don't want to be cooped up at home. And so actually one of the big interesting thing that helped massively are that the customers themselves have helped. And if you look now, you call many restaurants in Dubai today, not just ours, many of them are actually full. You try and call a shisha venue, forget alcohol for a second. Numerous shisha venues you'll call and say, no, we're full. We need a day or two, or sorry, can't do it tonight. It's crazy what you see and hear, but that is the state of the sector today. If you've got something good, people will come to you.
So, Gabrielle, many of your clients are from the Gulf. Has what Ramzy talked about in terms of the local support for concepts, does that tally with your experience?
I totally agree with him. That's exactly what we get. 99% of our clients are either Emiratis or Emirati-supported brands. Especially with the specialty coffee thing. I don't know if you've noticed that. We've got specialty coffee. I wonder why we call it specialty, because it's now everywhere, but we got specialty coffee brands opening up. And that's the trend that you see Emirati support. And I think a lot of creative stuff is coming out. It's not that they're just supporting each other because of the fact that they want to support each other as being the only driving force. I think the Emiratis have grown so much through the travel, through the years of evolution, through exploring different cultures, the tolerance part of the country, their love for creative expression. I think I've seen more creative stuff come out of just Emirati women who come to consult and have ideas. They've made Instagram really, really a great, almost free tool for marketing. So when I say marketing budgets, when I said earlier, I mean, marketing is not such an expensive thing anymore. You can actually get your brand seen and communicated on free portals like the social media, and they do a great job of it. So what we see is when they do open up, yes, the royal family supports it. You have a lot of visits, but I've also had visits to our brands that were not Emirati owned by the rulers. I think it's a great aspect where there's a general support of entrepreneurial spirit in the market. There is a great camaraderie between the Emiratis, and I think they also understand each other. When somebody builds a brand, they bring in certain elements that only they have their core on. So for me, when I get an Emirati client, I love picking their ideas. I love seeing what is it that they want to do and add on the F&B expertise, not take away from what they've got, because they've got some amazing ideas that when they do open them up, it's just natural for Emiratis to walk in and feel comfortable and be part of that and support each other. So yes, I totally agree with Ramzy. There is an amazing support that we don't see in the other expat, groups. But then again, if you look at pubs, we operate one of our own pubs under Lincoln called the Distillery in Souk Al Manzil. And it's full of repeat customers too, supporting it, bringing in more people wanting to see us stay afloat. I think everybody will find a way. I totally agree that we as humans, Ramzy said that earlier, that people drove in, people flew in, people moved here when they saw that we were, back to living life. We will never stop living. We have one life and we want to live it to the max. And food and beverage happens to be a big part of that social thing. We will continue doing that. And I think no matter what the segment is, we will continue supporting new brands.
What's been interesting is we've talked throughout this discussion about essentially homegrown concepts. This is people starting their own F&B concept, launching it, trying to see if it works, trying to find out if the numbers will come, trying to find out if the people will be interested in their concept. How do your numbers that you talked about relate to starting your own concept versus franchising a restaurant brand from another part of the world? Do people consult with you on that? What are the different considerations? Is that maybe more of a safety net when it comes to things like marketing support or infrastructure?
Yeah, we get that too. We get franchises and people. We've done more standalone because there's also this mentality of an entrepreneur to own and to say, I made this. This is my legacy. And
the IP.
Yes. And also to not be told what to do. Because when you take a franchise, you do follow And you take it because of that, because they've done something great somewhere, and you need to follow the guidelines. You need to follow the product when it comes in. What I see the difference, and I try to explain to clients the difference is, if you own it, if you create it from zero, yes, it's yours, but there's more investment. It takes almost a year or more for a brand to be recognized. Positioning happens after a year. The first year is a year of making brand awareness in the market. Whereas with a franchise, you automatically get that brand awareness because people have seen it. If you're choosing the right franchise and choosing it for the right reasons because it's done well somewhere else in the world, then people will wait for it to open doors. And you have that initial hype, you have that initial marketing edge over the others because it's recognized. But if it's not the right franchise, if it doesn't travel well, it doesn't add on the local intelligence. So without giving names, we've brought in a few franchises, but we've always consulted on adding on that element, that Dubai element, the element of who we are here and what we like, and sort of shifting those things around, adding those elements in terms of interior, sometimes in terms of product, sometimes in terms of size and location, and doing it right. Yes, franchises are a great investment if they're done right, and if you've got the right support and the right contracts in place with your franchisor. A lot of times I see people call a franchise, but it's not really a franchise. It's just taking someone's name and being able to put that logo on a few of the menu products, but there is no support because it's not been, the franchise itself, the agreement's not been structured right. Ideally, a good franchise would also look for the right operator. It should be a great match of expertise by the operator to be able to give that franchise its life and its journey in this part of the world. And the franchisor needs to have the integrity to bring in all the elements to it. And that's when it makes a lot of sense, when it's done right. Otherwise, that's why we're so popular on putting on so many homegrown brands in the market, because it still works out for this particular breed of investors that we work in. Non-licensed areas, casual dining, QSRs, hole in the wall, with the kind of budgets they've got and the zero expertise that we help actually put in the trainings and the other things with what they've got, the reserves, the resources they've got, it just makes more sense to go with a homegrown brand.
Ramzy, why is opening a restaurant such a kind of a fantasy for so many people? What is the appeal that people constantly come to the likes of Gabrielle and go, I want to open up my own thing?
Many people in life that you talk to, they may not have the courage to do it, but there's this fantasy, as you said, of wanting to own their own. I want to be able to say that's mine, whether it's a coffee shop or a restaurant or, a small place, a big place, depending on your budget. What people don't realize is that it consumes you if you don't set it up correctly. So it's not 7 days a week. It becomes 10 days a week, 29 hours a day, and you have no time to do anything else. They don't realize the complexity and the number of moving parts, because any time that we go out, as any of the three of us, you really, a restaurant is judged by the last meal they serve. You could have had 50 good meals. You have a bad one, you're going to get really upset. Now, you may be appeased by them. You may come back again, but if it happens again, you won't go back, despite having had 50. So it's a very, very difficult sector. You're only really as good as the last meal you've served and how you've treated those people. So, we're quite proud of the fact that I think back in, the raison d'etre of us as a group opening back in, or the idea in 2005 was to create homegrown concepts. So, we obviously launched with, the spectacular Okku that did extremely well.
And much missed, may I say?
We closed it for a reason. I mean, we are working on another one that we'll look to bring back shortly in a new undisclosed location for now. But it was a strategic decision at the time. It's many people since then have followed that same route of opening their own brands and gone to Gabrielle and gone to others and done that. And I think it works. It can work when you do one, and it's a passion. The question is, do they have longevity for it? Because you get excited, but when the work gets really hard, some of them will walk away from it and will let someone else run it, or they'll employ someone to do it and then they focus on something else. And that's when you can tell there's no love. So if you get, you can see when you get a plate of food somewhere, irrespective of the caliber of the venue, you can see if it's been made with love. You can taste if it's been made with love. If someone cares, is what I'm talking about. Not if someone sat and looked at the dish and go, I love you. But, did they actually care the way they made it, the way it was presented, the way it's brought out? Did the waiter throw it at you? Were they friendly to you? You can tell from a venue when you go, whether it's dine-in or not, how happy the staff are. Is it a stable environment? Do they have good morale or not? It's very, very clear. And so, going back to this aspect of they start something, and I think you can run a business successfully here as a startup. There are, the local community supports, not just what I said earlier with the Emiratis, but the whole local community will support, something that opens in El Cause and it's great and people go and it gets a good reputation and the press goes, etc. The question, looking at the franchise aspect that Gabrielle referred to, was what those people then don't realize is moving to that next step of trying to open a second or a third is a very, very big step. Because now you have to have, you can run one place. It's like keeping your home organized. But can you organize 3 or 4 homes? You now have to have policies and procedures and how you do everything documented. That's a whole new level of difficulty and skill set, which the majority of people either don't have the ability, don't have the advice or consultants that they can go to, like Gabrielle, or maybe they know they need to, they just don't. And some don't realize they need to and try and do it on their own, and then really get themselves into big trouble. So the sector becomes more difficult the longer you're in it. It doesn't become easier.
So self-promotion time, you've created 2 brands in particular. I know you've created many more than that, but you've created 2 brands in particular that have really made their mark in Dubai, and they're both incredibly different. Okku is a contemporary Asian fusion restaurant / kind of almost like lounge club environment, and then you have Claw in Suit Al Bahar, which is kind of an American style, almost like a dinery type place. What is it about those 2 different concepts that were able to survive for so long and become such a kind of a fixture on the F&B scene in Dubai?
I mean, I'll correct you slightly that, we look at Okku as sort of a high-end Japanese as opposed to, Asian fusion concept that, goes head to head with the global powerhouses of Nobu and Zuma. We're very proud of the achievements and the awards that we won for it. It's just attention to detail. Highest quality ingredient. You can have the best chefs in the world. At the fine dining level, you can have the best chefs in the world, but if you give them rubbish ingredients, they simply can't give you the food taste. And so, Dubai is excellent for that. It's a melting pot where you can get any ingredient you want here. And that's that gives the ability to create. And, one of the things we have seen, Michelin have been here a few times. They haven't yet awarded any restaurant a Michelin star. I think at some point soon that will happen. There is there is a drive, and certainly within our group, we're looking at a couple of concepts to try and get to that point. To bring the F&B scene to an even higher level here. And part of what DTCM is doing, there was an initiative last year that we were discussing with them where, part of the expansion of DTCM and marketing Dubai, a lot of people come to Dubai with the great job that they do for the hotels and the beaches and the shopping and, and everything that's amazing. You can be on a ski slope and, 5 minutes later you can be on the beach. But people don't realize the level of quality of F&B until they get here. And so the discussion that we had was that needs to be part of the pitch to get people here. And very much so that will actually then attract another group of customers that come for the F&B as well as enjoying the rest of Dubai. So that the sector itself promotes itself within the DTCM global marketing gambit. And I think that, that's a very positive movement for the sector, that it's being recognized as the economic support that it has for the economy with, there's huge numbers of people that work in the sector. You've got 200,000 people in Dubai alone. It's 10% of the population. That's not a joke. So it's a lot of people that, whose livelihoods depend on this sector.
And Gabrielle, it's not just about the food. It's obviously about creating the right ambiance and the right experience and the right vibe to a certain place. I mean, how much of your work goes into elevating the actual food by surrounding it with the right environment?
I think you need everything. So you can't compromise on location. We've always heard that we're in the real estate business. We're not in the just the food business. So I think with a great location, you've got one thing secured. You're going to have footfall. You're going to have the right kind of target market coming through. Your product is king. That's what I believe. You cannot do anything if it's not memorable. People need to keep on coming back, and they need a reason to come back. And that's always been the first thing I do when I make a concept. It needs to have that attraction. Ambiance is important. It doesn't have to cost you an arm and a leg, but it does have to have a feel of personality. For me, it's personality. It needs to match the concept. It needs to make people feel like I want to be here because I like this corner and I like the lighting. Music is important. I've never done a single concept where I've not put in a playlist of my choice, and it changes morning, afternoon, evening, and then late night, depending on what the concept is. I think all 5 senses need to be touched. Service is one area that I feel that we still need to be able to work on, and that will come with time. That will come with more education. That will come with the owners and investors understanding the importance of people feeling motivated enough to be a brand ambassadors. I think that's still an area that I find and I still need to educate our clients on. It's still the missing link there. For me, ambiance is not just the walls. It's also the people. It's the experience. It's everything coming together. And the fact that they came in because they saw something on Instagram, it needs to match. That's the missing part too. Sometimes food looks great on Instagram. It's been beautifully shot. But when it comes to the table, does it actually taste as good? Does it, keep the promise that was made in marketing? As Ramzy said, we are in a tough business, and I keep on repeating that. We don't need another restaurant. We need an operator that understands that this is a long-term decision. It's not a decision of coming in, because trends will come in every quarter.
Ramzy, do you think that there are still opportunities in this space?
There are significant opportunities still. And I think, look, when we all go out, we want a buzz. We want somewhere that has people. As humans, we don't want to go somewhere that's empty. If you go somewhere that's empty, you're not really that keen to stay. And so, the argument of bigger is better, it's not. Bigger is not better. And that's why, when you have some of these smaller venues that are full, they get a great reputation, there's a great vibe there. As humans, that's the sort of thing we want. Opportunity-wise, there's an awful lot that's available here. I mean, I think that the city is attracting many, many more people to come. Some of the rule changes that have happened in terms of passports and investments and others, that's all just doing nothing except attracting more and more people to make this city, more likable, more visitable, more livable, and that can only be good for the whole community. It makes the economy go round. The one thing in this sector that is a disaster is that if you look at every concept, there is no banking like the rest of the world. If you look at Europe or the US, there's 2 very big markets. The financial sector will assist to open. Now, there is some legal issues with that as well in terms of what happens if it doesn't go well. But you look at any of these concepts that open, they're all equity funded. The smaller ones, the majority that come to Gabrielle will all be, friends and family, relatively wealthy people that are opening up. When they're coming to expand, then yes, maybe they'll get some other bigger capital. Or some other larger investors to come on board. But that's one of the biggest challenges the sector has. That's not about to change either.
So summarising, Gabrielle, do you think that it still makes sense to open F&B concepts in Dubai, that this is still a market in which you can establish and make a success of a homegrown F&B concept?
Absolutely. We will never stop wanting to go out. We'll never stop wanting to have food delivered within 30 minutes and scroll down apps and choose if we want Mexican today or pizza tomorrow. F&B is here to stay. I think we need to ask the question, why do we want another restaurant? That is more of the question that I think needs to be answered, not do we stop eating? We don't stop eating. Yeah.
Ramzy, Gabrielle, I thoroughly enjoyed that conversation. Thank you very much indeed for sharing your insights with us today. Thank you everybody for listening in. This has been the Arabian Business Podcast. My name's Eddie Taylor. Thank you very much.